Black teen dragged off flight unfairly. Then she calls her father, who owns the airline. Picture yourself settling in for what should be a smooth flight, until it all goes wrong in a flash. In today's story, a black teen boards first class ready for a relaxing trip. But instead of friendly smiles, she's met with cold stares, accusations, and shockingly, is dragged from her seat in front of stunned passengers. It's a humiliating and infuriating moment, until she drops the bomb. Her father owns the entire airline. You won't believe how one phone call turns the tables and sends shockwaves through the skies. Ready for a ride filled with drama, twists, and karmic payback? Let's dive in. Ava Carter's morning had begun just like any other travel day. She was a bright, ambitious 17-year-old about to start her senior year in high school. Summer was winding down, and she had plans to explore Los Angeles with her best friend before the chaos of college applications began. Despite her father's busy schedule, he had surprised her with first-class tickets on Skybridge Airlines, an international carrier that had grown steadily over the last decade, renowned for excellent customer service. And unbeknownst to many, Ava's father, Jackson Carter, was not just its CEO but also its majority owner. Stepping into John F. Kennedy International Airport that morning, Ava wore a casual outfit, a comfortable pair of jeans, sneakers, and a sleek black jacket. She wasn't one to flaunt brand-name attire. She valued comfort over labels. Her father always taught her humility. No matter how high you climb, never look down on people. She carried this principle in her heart everywhere she went. Ava moved through security swiftly, greeting the staff with a warm smile and a thank you each time they checked her boarding pass and ID. She had a particular love for airports because they were gateways to possibility. Places where strangers from different walks of life converged, each with unique stories, each traveling somewhere for a reason. She loved imagining who these strangers were, where they were going, and why. Her seat was 3A in the first-class cabin, an early birthday present from her father to celebrate her upcoming 18th birthday. Although she had flown a few times in first class, the thrill never wore off. It reminded her of how far her family had come. Her father, Jackson, had worked multiple jobs in college while studying business administration. When he co-founded Skybridge Airlines, the goal was to create an airline that treated passengers with dignity and respect, bridging continents and cultures. Over the years, the airline expanded, eventually edging out smaller carriers. Now it was a familiar name in aviation, celebrated for comfortable seats and friendly service. But that morning, Ava noticed something off the moment she approached the gate. The agent, a tall, middle-aged man with a stern expression, eyed her skeptically. He scrutinized her outfit, her carry-on bag, and finally her face. His forced smile never reached his eyes. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, voice clipped, as if she had no right to be in the first-class boarding queue. "Yes, I'm on flight 806 to Los Angeles," Ava replied politely, handing him her boarding pass. She tried to remain friendly, but his demeanor set off alarm bells in her mind. She'd encountered subtle prejudice before, but something about his glower told her this was not going to be just a casual microaggression. The man took her boarding pass and scanned it, then studied the screen. He quirked an eyebrow. "You're in first class," he said slowly, as if she had no idea. "Yes," she said, trying not to sound frustrated. "Seat 3A. He eyed her again, then handed the pass back. "All right, boarding hasn't started, so just wait." No welcome aboard, no pleasant commentary, just a terse statement that left her feeling uneasy. Ava shrugged off the moment. She reminded herself that not everyone had to be sunshine and warmth. Nevertheless, she couldn't help feeling that she was under a microscope. Perhaps the man had had a rough day. Perhaps he was just strict. She steeled herself for a long flight and reminded herself that once she was settled in her seat, she would sleep or watch a movie to pass the time. But the uneasy feeling never left her. Sometimes, especially as a young black woman in predominantly white or heavily corporate spaces, she felt eyes on her that questioned whether she belonged. She knew from experience that prejudice came in many forms, sometimes brazen, sometimes covert. Little did she know, This was just the beginning of what would become a flight she would never forget. As the announcement rang out for first-class boarding, Ava joined a short line of well-dressed business travelers. The gate agent barely even looked at her again, though a different staff member scanned her pass and welcomed her aboard. Ava tried to relax, reminding herself she was there to enjoy a vacation. She had no idea that the next few hours would be fraught with drama, that she would face a humiliation so profound it would go viral, and that the revelation of who her father was would ignite a scandal that would shake the entire airline industry. When Ava stepped onto the aircraft, the flight attendants at the door greeted her with polite nods, though one attendant, whose name tag read Sandra, seemed to do a double take. Something flashed across Sandra's expression, a flicker of confusion, maybe disapproval, but it passed quickly. "Good morning, Miss Carter," Sandra said, handing Ava a warm towel and gesturing toward the first-class cabin. "Can I help you find your seat?" "I'm in 3A," Ava answered, holding up her ticket. "Right this way," Sandra said, taking a step back to allow Ava through. The flight attendant's politeness seemed rehearsed, but at least it wasn't openly hostile. Ava found her seat, stowed her carry-on, and settled into the plush leather. Slowly, the cabin filled with other travelers. A man in a crisp gray suit sat in 1A, fiddling with a tablet. A middle-aged woman with an elegant scarf took seat 2C, flipping through a gossip magazine. Ava put on her headphones, scrolled through the in-flight entertainment, and selected a documentary about marine life. She hoped to doze off. She had woken up at 5 a.m. to get to the airport on time. Just as she was starting to drift off, she felt someone standing over her. She opened her eyes to see Sandra again. "Ma'am, can I get you something to drink before takeoff?" "Yes, a glass of orange juice, please," Ava replied. Her voice was calm, though she sensed some underlying tension in Sandra's presence. The flight attendant served her the juice in a small glass, placed a napkin on her armrest, then left without further comment. Minutes later, the airplane doors were closed. The engines roared to life. The safety briefing played on the screens as the aircraft taxied toward the runway. Ava took a few deep breaths. She always got a rush of excitement as a plane sped down the runway, the world dropping away beneath her as she soared into the sky. She leaned back, letting the comforting hum of flight wash over her. About 20 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign turned off. Ava decided to stretch her legs. She pulled off her headphones and walked up to the lavatory in the front. On her way back, she noticed Sandra whispering to another flight attendant, a younger man with a name tag reading Eric. Both sets of eyes flicked over her. Ava pretended not to notice, but she couldn't shake the feeling she was being watched. Trying to calm her nerves, she returned to her seat, buckled up, and scrolled through the entertainment menu again. She could sense subtle shifts in energy. This time, however, it wasn't just in her head. She overheard snippets of conversation behind her, something about security protocols and passenger identification. She tried to brush it off. Perhaps something else was happening on the flight. Before she could fully immerse herself in her documentary, Sandra appeared again. This time she wasn't offering a drink or snack. Her lips were pressed together in a thin line. "Miss Carter," she began, her voice tense. "We need to see your boarding pass again." Ava blinked in surprise. "Sure," she said, leaning to retrieve it from her purse. She handed it over, eyeing Sandra curiously. "Is something wrong?" Sandra examined the boarding pass as though it might be counterfeit. Her gaze flicked from Ava to the ticket. "Where did you get this boarding pass?" she finally asked, the question laced with implication. Ava's brow furrowed. What do you mean? I printed it at home. My dad booked this flight for me. Is there a problem?" Sandra hesitated, exhaling sharply. "We're verifying all first-class tickets. It's a new policy to ensure the safety and comfort of our passengers." Ava's chest tightened. She'd heard that line before, ensuring comfort, often code for deciding who looks like they belong and who doesn't. Swallowing her indignation, she forced a polite smile. "Here's my ID too," she offered, hoping to cut this short. Sandra took the ID, gave it a cursory glance, and handed it back. "Thank you," she said coldly, before turning on her heel and walking away. Ava's hands trembled. She tried to calm herself with slow, deep breaths. Perhaps it was just a random check, she told herself. Yet her gut told her otherwise, that she was being targeted for who she was, for how she looked. The pit in her stomach told her the worst was yet to come. The flight settled into a cruising altitude, seatbelt signs switching off once again. A different flight attendant came through the aisle to offer lunch menus. Ava selected the grilled chicken salad, grateful for something to occupy her thoughts. As she waited, she put her headphones back on, trying to lose herself in the mesmerizing footage of coral reefs and deep-sea creatures. But just as the food cart arrived, Sandra returned, this time with the gate agent from earlier. His name tag read, Mr. Reynolds. Ava's pulse quickened. It was bizarre for a gate agent to be on board. Usually they remained at the airport. Perhaps he had been traveling as a non-rev passenger, or there was some other reason. But the look on his face wasn't friendly in the slightest. "Miss Carter," Mr. Reynolds said, voice dripping with condescension. "We need a word." Ava removed her headphones, her stomach twisting. Passengers around her started to notice the commotion. A few turned to look. Some frowned in confusion. Others feigned disinterest, but kept an ear open. She forced a neutral tone. "Yes?" He held out his hand, beckoning for her ID and boarding pass again. "There's been a discrepancy with your ticket purchase. We have reason to believe you may be using a stolen or fraudulent ticket." Ava's jaw dropped. "What? That's impossible. My dad purchased it. Here." She rummaged in her purse for the papers containing the purchase confirmation. Mr. Reynolds took them, glaring at the printout as if it were written in invisible ink. The tension in the cabin skyrocketed. Even the older woman in 2C craned her neck to see what was going on. "Miss, the name on the credit card used to purchase this ticket does not match yours," Mr. Reynolds said, flipping through the documents. "It's my father's credit card," Ava explained, voice wavering between anger and disbelief. "He booked the flight for me. That's why his name is on the card. I'm 17. I don't have a personal credit card yet." Mr. Reynolds shot a dubious glance at Sandra, then back at Ava. "Do you have any way to verify your relationship with this so-called father? Because we have no record of a parental consent form or anything that indicates a minor traveling with a parent's authorization." Ava felt the blood drain from her face. "I'm not that kind of minor," she tried to clarify. "I'm old enough to fly alone. My dad is the one who booked the ticket. People do that all the time, booking flights for family." Sandra's lip curled slightly, as though she didn't believe a word Ava was saying. "We have your ID, but we need more definitive proof. If you can't provide it, you'll have to move to economy, or possibly disembark at our next stop." "Next stop? We're on a direct flight," Ava said, her voice rising. "And I shouldn't have to move anywhere. I didn't do anything wrong." By now the confrontation had drawn the attention of nearly everyone in first class, and some from economy who peered curiously through the curtain. Ava's cheeks burned with humiliation. Why were they treating her like a criminal? Mr. Reynolds exhaled through flared nostrils. "We need you to come with us to the front galley, so we can sort this out privately." Ava's heart thundered. She considered for a moment telling them outright who her father was, the Jackson Carter, CEO of Skybridge Airlines. But something in her gut told her that would only escalate tensions. Her father had always raised her to handle conflicts calmly. However, he'd also told her never to let people walk all over her. She rose from her seat, fighting the lump in her throat, and followed Mr. Reynolds and Sandra toward the galley. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, some sympathetic, others judging. She hated how her voice trembled when she spoke, hated how her hands felt sweaty and her knees weak. But she squared her shoulders, determined to defend herself. In the cramped confines of the front galley, Ava was cornered by Mr. Reynolds and Sandra. A curtain separated them from the passengers, but Ava could still sense the hush that fell over first class. She could practically feel the collective curiosity behind that flimsy partition. I don't understand why this is happening, Ava said, her voice trembling with a mix of outrage and nerves. I have a legitimate ticket. Mr. Reynolds frowned deeply, crossing his arms. We have had issues with fraudulent first-class tickets in the past, he said, as if reading from a script. People using stolen credit cards or forging documentation. But that's not me, Ava interjected. It's under my father's name. His name is Jackson Carter. I can call him if you want. Sandra narrowed her eyes. Jackson Carter, she repeated, her tone mocking. As in the CEO of Skybridge Airlines? We see. And let me guess, you're his daughter? Ava's heart hammered. She swallowed hard, glaring back. Yes, that's exactly who I am. Look it up if you don't believe me. The skepticism in their eyes was palpable. Mr. Reynolds let out a barking laugh. So, you're claiming to be the daughter of the Jackson Carter who runs this entire airline? Yes, Ava insisted. He's my father, and he booked this ticket for me as a birthday gift. If you'd just let me call him, we could clear this up right now. Sandra and Mr. Reynolds exchanged glances. She could see that they weren't convinced. Worse yet, they seemed insulted by the idea that a teenager might be telling them how to do their jobs, or might be connected to the top in a way that bypassed their authority. Ma'am, Sandra said slowly, as though talking to a child, if Mr. Carter were truly your father, I'm sure he would have alerted the staff or provided special instructions. If you're trying to impersonate someone important to avoid suspicion, that's a serious offense. Ava felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to cry. Why would I lie about something that can be easily checked? Call the main office, call him directly. Do whatever you need to do. Mr. Reynolds shook his head. We're not going to waste corporate resources on a hunch. Either you provide acceptable proof right now, or we'll be forced to remove you from the aircraft at our next opportunity. Ava's voice rose, panic mixing with anger. Remove me? For what? I haven't done anything. Just then, the curtain flew aside. Eric, the younger flight attendant, stepped in, looking uneasy. Is everything okay here? He asked in a hushed tone. Sandra shot him a withering look. We're handling it. Eric cast a glance at Ava, and in his eyes, she saw a flicker of empathy. He gently placed a hand on Sandra's arm. Passengers are getting anxious. Maybe we should proceed carefully. She's a minor after all. Let's verify properly. Mr. Reynolds bristled but relented. Fine. Miss Carter, can you produce any communication from your so-called father? An email, a text message, something? Yes, Ava nearly exclaimed in relief. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out her phone. It was on airplane mode, of course, so she couldn't immediately show them any live text messages. But she had screenshots of a conversation with her father, in which he'd sent her the flight details. Look, she said, tapping through her gallery. He sent me my itinerary. She showed them a screenshot. A text thread with Dad as the contact name, detailing flight times and seat numbers. Mr. Reynolds frowned, unimpressed. Anyone can label a contact Dad, he muttered. Exasperated, Ava scrolled to another screenshot. It was from the official Skybridge Airlines employee portal, an itinerary confirmation that Jackson had forwarded her. His full name, Jackson D. Carter, was on the email header, along with Skybridge corporate details. This is the email. He forwarded it to me. It has the official corporate signature. How else would I get this? Sandra's lips tightened as she considered it, but Mr. Reynolds refused to glance at the phone, as if ignoring it would invalidate the evidence. Fake emails aren't hard to create, he said dismissively. Ava stared at him, outraged by the blatant refusal to accept proof. Can I please just call him? At least let me step into the cockpit area or somewhere with a signal. Sandra scoffed. Ma'am, you can't just step into the cockpit. That's a major security violation. You're being very difficult. Ava's composure started to crack. I'm being difficult? You're accusing me of fraud without any real evidence. An older flight attendant came forward. Her name tag read Linda. She peered at the scene, looking deeply concerned. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Sandra huffed. "This passenger claims to be Jackson Carter's daughter, but we have no proof beyond what could be forged screenshots." Linda blinked, clearly recognizing the significance of that claim. Jackson Carter was well known throughout the company. "Why not radio the corporate desk? They can verify any VIP passenger in minutes." Ava exhaled. Finally, someone who seemed reasonable. "Yes, please do that." But Mr. Reynolds shook his head, doubling down. "We don't have time for that. The plane's in mid-flight, and we're not diverting just to placate someone who probably snuck into first class. I will not be made a fool of." Ava's blood boiled at his words. Her voice shook. "Sneaking into first class? My father owns—" She paused, realizing logic was useless against their biases. "Look, you can see I'm not some threat, right?" He ignored her plea and turned to Linda. "We need to remove her from first class. If she's not compliant, we'll contact air marshals or ground security at our diversion airport." Ava's heart hammered. Diversion airport? This was spiraling out of control. She looked around, desperate for a sympathetic face. Eric seemed conflicted. Linda seemed exasperated. But Sandra and Mr. Reynolds stood like statues of disapproval. Before Ava could protest, Mr. Reynolds stepped forward, grabbing her elbow. "Come with us now." Fear shot through Ava. She tried to pull away. "Don't touch me." She didn't want to cause a scene, but she also wasn't about to be manhandled like a criminal. Things escalated in an instant. Sandra reached out, and in the cramped space it felt as though multiple hands were on Ava, forcing her to move. Ava panicked, recalling all the stories she'd read about passengers, especially black passengers being mistreated during flights. She twisted her arm free, tears stinging her eyes as she tried to remain composed. "Stop," Linda hissed, stepping between them. "There's no need to use force. We can resolve this calmly." But Mr. Reynolds was past the point of reason. "She's refusing to cooperate," he snapped. "You saw it. She's resisting." The next thing Ava knew, the curtain was yanked aside, and half the first-class cabin could see Mr. Reynolds and Sandra wrestling with her. Gasps rippled through the aisle. Cameras and phones immediately rose to record. It was humiliating and terrifying all at once. In the chaos, Ava's jacket slipped off her shoulder, revealing a bruise forming on her arm where Mr. Reynolds had grabbed her. Passengers in first class erupted into protests. "Hey, that's unnecessary," shouted the businessman in 1A, standing up to intervene. A woman from 2C also stood glaring at Mr. Reynolds and Sandra. "She's just a kid. Let her go." Ava's cheeks burned. Her eyes brimmed with tears she refused to let fall. The humiliation of being physically manhandled in front of a cabin full of onlookers churned her stomach. She locked eyes with a passenger recording the incident on his phone, a middle-aged man with shock on his face, and a jolt of realization ran through her. This was going to go viral. Her life was about to change, for better or worse. "Stop filming, please," Sandra barked at the man, but he ignored her, continuing to document every moment. Eric hurried over, hands raised in a calming gesture. "Everyone, please remain seated. We'll handle this in an orderly fashion." He then turned to Mr. Reynolds, voice low but urgent. "Reynolds, you're making a scene. Let's step back and de-escalate, okay?" Mr. Reynolds sneered at him. "I'm making a scene? This passenger is the one causing trouble." Ava, breathing heavily, looked from Eric to Linda. She seized the moment of pause. "I just want to call my dad, that's it. Please," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "One call and we can settle this." Linda nodded, looking at Mr. Reynolds. Let her do it. It's the simplest way to verify her claim. But before Mr. Reynolds could reply, the plane lurched. The pilot had hit some turbulence. The fastened seatbelt sign dinged on, and the overhead announcement instructed passengers to take their seats. Mr. Reynolds seized the opportunity. "That's enough. We're returning to our seats. Young lady, you'll be relocated to the back of the plane. If you resist, we'll be forced to treat you as a non-compliant passenger." Ava's heart clenched. She imagined herself being dragged through the entire aircraft, the sea of shocked faces, the embarrassment. More than that, she dreaded what might happen next. An arrest, accusations that she had resisted flight crew orders. This was a nightmare. And yet, they weren't letting her do the one thing that would clear her name. By now, half a dozen passengers in first class had their phones out. Murmurs of, "She's just a minor. This is outrageous," and "Call the airline's corporate for God's sake," filled the air. A woman from economy even pushed her way to the front, her voice trembling with righteous anger. "You can't do that to her. She's done nothing wrong." Sandra tried to block the woman from advancing. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. We will involve the authorities if necessary." The woman glared at Sandra. "Do it. I'll wait. This is blatant discrimination and you know it." Ava felt a surge of gratitude that these strangers were speaking up. But it also made everything more chaotic. In the swirl of shouts and cameras, Mr. Reynolds and Sandra doubled down, convinced they were losing control of the cabin. "All right, that's it," Mr. Reynolds snapped. "We're going to make an emergency landing if necessary to remove you from this flight, miss." He grabbed Ava's arm again, more forcefully this time, and yanked. She stumbled forward, smacking into one of the seat dividers. Pain shot through her shoulder. The cabin erupted in an uproar, with passengers shouting at the flight crew to stop. Ava, tears finally spilling over, shouted, "Let me go!" She tried to jerk her arm free, but Mr. Reynolds tightened his grip. Suddenly, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, commanding flight attendants to cease passenger movement until the turbulence passed. Mr. Reynolds reluctantly let go, but the damage was done. Ava crumpled into the seat nearest her, sobbing as cameras continued to roll. "I didn't do anything," she gasped, feeling helpless and furious. "This is so wrong." In that moment, Linda rushed to Ava's side, kneeling beside her. "Honey, are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Ava's only response was a slow shake of her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. Eric hovered nearby, his eyes darting between Ava and Mr. Reynolds. He looked torn, as if he wanted to intervene but was constrained by the chain of command. Finally, he handed Ava some tissues, whispering, "I'm sorry." Ava clutched the tissues, struggling to regain composure. She glanced around at the passengers who were outraged on her behalf. In that swirl of tension and confusion, one thing was clear. This flight was now a powder keg waiting to explode. As the turbulence eased, the pilot repeated the command for passengers to remain seated. Despite that, Mr. Reynolds insisted that Ava had to be moved. Linda protested. "Captain's orders. She needs to stay seated until it's safe." But Mr. Reynolds wasn't having it. "Fine. Once it's safe, we escort her to the back. End of discussion." Ava's tears had subsided, replaced by a cold fury. She glared at Mr. Reynolds, rubbing her bruised arm. "I'm not going anywhere until I call my father," he snorted. "We'll see about that." From behind them, the businessman in 1A, a tall man with silver hair and a commanding presence, suddenly stood and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Excuse me, I'm a lawyer. I've been recording everything since this started." He turned to Mr. Reynolds. "If you continue to assault this minor without proper cause, you and Skybridge Airlines could be facing a serious lawsuit. I suggest you allow her the phone call or do the corporate verification. Right now, you're violating her rights." A hush fell. Some passengers murmured in agreement. Mr. Reynolds's face reddened, but he remained defiant. "Sir, this is an airline security matter. We appreciate your concern, but we're following procedures." The lawyer shook his head. "Procedures do not include physically assaulting a passenger. You've overstepped. Let her call her father." With so many phones trained on them, the flight staff could no longer operate under the radar. Sandra whispered something in Mr. Reynolds's ear. He clenched his jaw as though wrestling with his pride. Finally, he snapped, "Fine, make the call. Once we're in a position where we can allow phone calls without jeopardizing flight regulations." Ava's spirit soared at the concession, but she also caught the venom in his tone. He was only agreeing because they were cornered. Still, it was a step. If she could just speak to her father, everything would be settled. Linda helped Ava back to her seat in 3A. Passengers whispered words of encouragement. One woman pressed a small chocolate into Ava's hand in a silent gesture of support. The man recording from 1A gave her a nod. "This is all on video," he assured her quietly. Ava mouthed a thank you, her heart racing but slightly calmer. She fastened her seatbelt and stared out the window, the bright sunlight glinting off the plane's wing. For a brief moment she let her mind drift, imagining her father's reaction when she finally told him what had happened. She wanted to believe he'd handle it swiftly, that heads would roll, but a shadow of doubt lingered. Could she truly rely on him to fix this? She knew he loved her more than anything, but the wheels of corporate bureaucracy sometimes moved slowly, and the prejudice of individual employees could be stubborn. Another wave of turbulence jolted the plane. The pilot came over the intercom again, explaining they would try to find smoother air at a different altitude. The seatbelt sign remained on. Ava was forced to wait. It felt like an eternity before the flight leveled off again, and the seatbelt sign dinged off. The moment it happened, Ava dug her phone out of her pocket. She unlocked it, ignoring Mr. Reynolds and Sandra hovering at the galley. "Cell phones must remain on airplane mode," Sandra barked. "We can't allow cell signals in flight." Ava froze, blinking back frustration. "I can't connect unless I turn off airplane mode. Let me just send a text or place a call via Wi-Fi. Skybridge flights have Wi-Fi, right?" Sandra folded her arms. "Only for data, not for voice calls. And you need to purchase a pass. We're not giving you free access." Ava's eyes narrowed. "Fine, I'll buy it. And I'll do a voice call through a messaging app if possible." Mr. Reynolds glowered, muttering to Sandra, "You can't do voice calls through the in-flight Wi-Fi. It's restricted." A passenger behind them piped up. "Actually, some apps allow voice calls over Wi-Fi. It's the airline's policy to discourage it, but it's not always blocked." Ava looked desperately at Linda. "Please, I need to speak to my dad. I can't do that with half measures. If the airline blocks voice calls, can I use the airplane phone? There's a phone up front that staff use, right?" Linda hesitated. "Technically, yes, but it's typically for crew communication or in emergencies." Ava's voice quavered. "This is an emergency for me." She pointed to her bruised arm. "They used force on me. I need to speak to my father. If they keep stonewalling, it'll only escalate." A flicker of sympathy crossed Linda's face. "Let me talk to the pilot." She disappeared into the cockpit area, leaving Ava waiting anxiously. Meanwhile, Sandra and Mr. Reynolds hovered in the aisle, as if ready to pounce if Ava tried anything. Passengers looked on, their expressions ranging from worry to outrage. A few minutes later, Linda returned, expression grave. "The pilot says we can make a call to corporate if that helps, but calling your father directly on the flight deck phone is not an option, unless the situation is declared a safety emergency." Ava slumped in her seat, despair washing over her. "This is ridiculous. My father is the only person who can verify my ticket and put a stop to this." Linda raised a hand. "The pilot agreed to let me call the corporate desk. They can conference in your father. It's not standard procedure, but given the circumstances," Ava felt a surge of hope. "Thank you," Mr. Reynolds cut in. "I'll make the call. I'm the gate agent, so I'll handle it." But Linda shook her head. "With all due respect, sir, I think it's better if I do it. You're compromised." She left no room for argument and ushered Ava to a small area near the cockpit door. Ava's heart thundered as Linda picked up the in-flight phone, punched in a code, and waited. Seconds later, Linda spoke into the receiver. "This is Linda Harrison, lead flight attendant on Flight 806 to Los Angeles, calling the corporate desk. We have a passenger situation that needs immediate resolution." Time seemed to slow. Ava could hear her own pulse thrumming in her ears. Finally, Linda said, "Yes, can I speak to or have a message relayed to Jackson Carter?" "That's correct, the CEO. We have a passenger here claiming to be his daughter. She's requesting direct contact for verification." Ava's stomach clenched. Would corporate believe them? Would they just blow her off? Linda continued. Yes, her name is Ava Carter. She says she's traveling under a legitimate ticket purchased by Mr. Carter. All right, I'll wait. Silence. Each second stretched out like an hour. Ava's mind spun with worst-case scenarios. What if her father was in a meeting and unreachable? What if corporate staff wouldn't disturb him? Suddenly, Linda's eyes widened. Yes, we can hold. She put her hand over the phone, turning to Ava. They're patching us through to Mr. Carter's executive assistant. Keep your fingers crossed. Ava's heart soared. This was it. The truth was about to come out. She breathed in, trying to steady herself, ignoring the hateful glare from Mr. Reynolds a few feet away. One phone call, and the tides would turn. Linda kept the phone pressed to her ear. Hello, Miss Prescott, she said formally. I have a passenger here, Ava Carter, claiming to be Mr. Jackson Carter's daughter. She's requested an urgent verification. Yes, she's here. Ava nodded frantically, eyes wide. Linda passed the phone over. Speak, dear, but keep it brief. Ava took the receiver. She recognized Miss Prescott's voice, a calm, efficient tone. Miss Prescott, it's Ava. Please, I need to talk to my dad. There's been a misunderstanding. Ava, oh my goodness, Miss Prescott exclaimed. Are you okay? Your father's in a board meeting, but I can get him immediately if it's urgent. It's urgent, Ava said quickly, voice trembling. They're accusing me of having a fake ticket. I'm on flight 806, heading to LA. They've threatened to remove me from the plane. There was a pause. Stay calm, Ava. Let me get Mr. Carter out of his meeting. In the background, Ava heard muffled voices and the click of a door. Okay, hold on. Ava held her breath, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief just speaking to someone from corporate. A minute later, a familiar voice came on the line, ragged with concern. Ava? Honey, what's going on? Dad! Ava nearly sobbed with relief. They said my ticket is fraudulent. They're treating me like a criminal. One of the gate agents, Mr. Reynolds, is here. He and a flight attendant, Sandra, keep accusing me of lying. They manhandled me, Dad. They wouldn't let me prove who I am. She heard her father's sharp intake of breath. They what? Ava, are you hurt? She touched the bruise on her arm. A little. They yanked me around. It's all on camera. Passengers recorded it. People are furious. Jackson Carter's voice deepened with anger. Stay put. Let me speak to the flight crew. Put me on with the lead attendant. Ava quickly handed the phone back to Linda. My father wants to talk to you. Ava's voice trembled, but a sense of vindication was creeping in. Linda placed the receiver to her ear. Mr. Carter, this is Linda Harrison, lead flight attendant on flight 806. First, let me apologize on behalf of the crew. I only recently learned of this situation. Her voice quavered slightly. Yes, sir, of course, I understand. Yes, I'll pass you to them. She glanced sidelong at Mr. Reynolds and Sandra, who looked absolutely stunned, though still defiant. Mr. Reynolds, Linda said firmly, extending the phone to him. Mr. Carter wants a word. Mr. Reynolds swallowed hard. The color drained from his face. He stepped forward, took the phone with a trembling hand, and introduced himself. Hello, Mr. Carter. This is Gary Reynolds, the gate agent. Yes, I did board the flight because I had suspected. Yes, sir, I understand. His expression contorted as a barrage of heated words from the other end filtered through. I apologize, Mr. Carter. We had no idea. Yes, but sir, from our perspective. Yes, sir, of course. He winced as if physically recoiling from Jackson Carter's anger. Sandra hovered at Mr. Reynolds' elbow, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Passengers in first class watched with keen interest, some smirking at the sudden turn of events. Finally, Mr. Reynolds stammered, We will absolutely remedy this situation, Mr. Carter. I deeply apologize. Thank you. With that, he handed the phone back to Linda, who spoke briefly with Jackson, then hung up. A stunned silence ensued. Mr. Reynolds avoided eye contact with Ava, his face beet red. Sandra looked mortified, but also defensive. Linda, softly clearing her throat, announced, Mr. Carter has instructed us to ensure Miss Ava Carter is treated with the utmost respect for the remainder of the flight. He also wants a full incident report prepared. A ripple of relief mixed with satisfaction passed through the cabin. Ava could feel the pent-up tension finally releasing. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling her heart race. It was over. Her father had intervened, or so she thought. Without warning, Mr. Reynolds tried to salvage his pride. We were only doing our duty, making sure no fraudulent activity took place, he said loudly, addressing the passengers who were all ears. We had no intention of harming anyone. The passenger was non-compliant. That statement lit a spark in the cabin. Multiple passengers responded with outrage. We have videos, someone called. She was compliant until you grabbed her. Ava wiped her tears, finally standing on steady legs. She turned to Mr. Reynolds, her voice shaky but clear. You physically dragged me. You refused to listen when I tried to show you proof. You humiliated me in front of everyone, and you threatened me with removal or worse. That wasn't just doing your duty. Passengers murmured in agreement. The tension in Mr. Reynolds' face indicated he was suppressing a retort. Sandra looked like she might cry, but she also clenched her jaw, refusing to apologize. Linda stepped between them, holding up a hand. Let's keep calm. We still have several hours left in this flight. We need to continue safely. Mr. Reynolds attempted a weak apology. I'm sorry, if we caused you distress. Ava bristled at the non-apology. I'm sure the corporate office will want a full account. Linda gently guided Ava back to her seat. Let's get you settled, dear. You've been through enough. Ava slumped into her seat, exhaustion and relief mingling in her mind. She just wanted the flight to be over. She felt the bruise on her arm throb. At least now everyone knew the truth. She belonged in first class, and the father she had tried to avoid name-dropping had come to her rescue. As the flight continued, the mood in the first-class cabin remained tense. People whispered and exchanged glances, clearly still outraged by what had happened. Some had posted snippets of the incident on social media. Ava's phone buzzed intermittently with messages from friends who had seen the viral clips. Her name was trending on Twitter, apparently, though she had to keep her phone on airplane mode aside from occasional Wi-Fi usage. Linda brought Ava an ice pack for her bruise and offered words of comfort. I've been with Skybridge Airlines for 20 years, she said, voice tinged with sadness. This isn't how we treat passengers, especially not the daughter of the man who built this company on respect and service. I'm so sorry. Ava nodded gratefully, though her emotions were a jumble. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it. Meanwhile, Mr. Reynolds barricaded himself in the galley, quietly conversing with Sandra. She occasionally peeked out, as if afraid to face the wrath of the passengers. Eric busied himself with normal flight duties, refilling drinks and handing out blankets. Whenever he passed Ava, he lowered his eyes, ashamed. About an hour later, the pilot's voice chimed over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're cruising at 35,000 feet and anticipate a smooth ride to Los Angeles. On behalf of Skybridge Airlines, I'd like to apologize for any inconvenience you may have experienced earlier. We appreciate your cooperation. Passengers exchanged knowing looks. They understood that the pilot was referencing more than just inconvenience. Ava remained silent, her thoughts churning. She glanced out the window at the endless expanse of clouds. Part of her wanted the flight to end immediately so she could talk to her father face to face. Another part dreaded the media storm awaiting her once they landed. Sure enough, Linda approached with a quiet warning. Miss Carter, your father contacted me again. He said the press got wind of this. There might be reporters at LAX when we land. Security will escort you through a private exit if you prefer. Ava's stomach flipped. It's that big? Linda nodded regretfully. Yes, several passengers posted videos online. It's already trending. Hashtags like #SkybridgeScandal and #Justice for Ava Carter. Ava bit her lip. She never wanted to be the center of attention this way. I just want to see my dad, she whispered, and go on with my vacation. Linda squeezed her hand gently. You will, dear. Try to get some rest. Ava closed her eyes, but rest didn't come easily. Images replayed in her mind. The rough grip on her arm, the panic in her chest, the stares of the passengers. She wondered if she could have done anything differently. Yet no matter how she turned it over in her head, she couldn't see how she was at fault for any of it. Eventually she dozed off for a short while, lulled by the gentle roar of the engines. She dreamed of a simpler time. Her father pushing her on a swing when she was little, telling her she could fly as high as she wanted. He had always encouraged her to chase her dreams, and now that she was on the verge of adulthood, the world seemed to throw obstacles at her, one after another. She woke to the scent of fresh coffee. Eric stood by her seat with a steaming cup. Thought you might need something warm, he said gently. It's on the house. Ava managed a tired smile. Thanks. She took a sip, letting the heat soothe her frazzled nerves. Eric shifted uncomfortably. I'm really sorry about what happened. I tried to speak up, but Reynolds outranks me. I still should have done more. Ava studied him, seeing genuine remorse. Thank you, she said. I appreciate your kindness, Eric. He nodded and returned to his duties, leaving Ava alone with her thoughts again. She spent the next hour watching a movie, anything to distract her from the fiasco. Occasionally, a passenger would lean across the aisle to whisper words of support, "Stay strong," or "We're on your side." It helped, but she still felt exhausted, emotionally raw, and oddly disoriented by the sudden media exposure. Finally, the announcement came that they would begin their descent into Los Angeles International Airport. Ava felt her pulse quicken. In less than half an hour, she'd be on the ground, facing whatever firestorm awaited her. She dreaded stepping off the plane, but she also yearned to see her father, to feel safe again. The jet's wheels screeched against the runway at LAX, and a collective exhale swept the cabin. As they taxied to the gate, Linda approached Ava one last time. Your father arranged a private escort. Please stay seated until everyone else disembarks. Ava nodded. She could almost feel the press of cameras outside, the swirl of voices. She slipped her phone out to see a deluge of missed calls and messages. Her best friend Monica had left a frantic string of voice notes. Ava, are you okay? I just saw you trending on Twitter. Please call me. As soon as the seatbelt sign turned off, passengers began gathering their belongings. Many paused by Ava's seat to offer a final word of support, or a gentle pat on the shoulder. One woman insisted on giving Ava her business card. My brother is a journalist at the Los Angeles Times. If you need help, call him. Ava thanked her, touched by the solidarity. Mr. Reynolds slunk past, avoiding her gaze. Sandra trailed behind him, looking equally chastened. Ava caught fragments of their hurried conversation. Corporate's gonna have our heads, Mr. Reynolds muttered. Sandra nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. Ava felt a conflicted pang. As angry as she was, she found no joy in their obvious dread. Finally, the cabin was nearly empty. Linda signaled for Ava to follow. Together they made their way toward the exit. At the door, a member of airport security in a neat uniform greeted Ava. Miss Carter, I'm Officer Patel. I'll escort you to a private lounge. Your father is waiting there. Ava's heart pounded. She stepped onto the jet bridge, flanked by Linda and Officer Patel. The moment they entered the terminal, flashes of cameras and a cacophony of voices assaulted them. Reporters and paparazzi jostled behind a barricade, shouting questions like, Ava, what happened on that flight? And are you going to sue Skybridge Airlines? Security personnel held them at bay, but their lenses clicked furiously. Inside the lounge, her father stood waiting. Tall, charismatic, with a commanding presence and immaculate suit, Jackson Carter had the air of a man who was used to controlling the narrative. But the moment he saw Ava, his mask of corporate authority crumbled. He rushed to her, arms outstretched, and pulled her into a hug. My God, Ava, he murmured, voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Are you hurt? He gently lifted her arm, wincing at the bruise. I saw the videos. I can't believe my employees would treat you like that. Ava pressed her face into his shoulder, inhaling the comforting scent of his cologne. She wanted to cry all over again, but she held it together. Dad, it was awful they wouldn't listen. Jackson guided her to a plush sofa, Linda quietly stepping aside to give them space. I've already spoken to the board, he said, voice low but firm. I've launched an internal investigation. Mr. Reynolds and Sandra are being called to headquarters for a disciplinary hearing. I won't allow bigotry or abuse of power in this airline. Ava sighed, relief and exhaustion mingling. Thank you. He stroked her hair gently. Are you sure you're okay? We can take you to a doctor just to check that arm. She shook her head. I'll be fine. It's just a bruise. I'm more worried about the emotional fallout. Jackson's eyes hardened. I've already got my PR team handling the media. This is going to be a storm, no doubt. But the important thing is that you're safe. We'll address the rest. After a moment, Jackson noticed Linda standing nearby. He rose, extending a hand. You must be Linda Harrison, lead flight attendant. Thank you for helping my daughter. She shook his hand, looking relieved. I tried to do the right thing, sir. I apologize that it went this far. Jackson nodded. I appreciate your stepping in, and I'll remember your integrity. Ava exhaled a tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She had dreaded this meeting, fearing her father would be so enraged that she'd get lost in the corporate vengeance. But seeing him focus on her well-being first and foremost reminded her that beneath the CEO persona, he was still her dad. Linda excused herself, leaving father and daughter alone in the lounge. What happens now? Ava asked quietly. Jackson took a seat beside her. Now, we meet with legal and HR to make sure Mr. Reynolds and Sandra face the consequences. The same goes for any other staff who mishandled the situation. I'm not going to sweep this under the rug. Skybridge's reputation is built on fairness and respect. This kind of incident can't go unanswered. Ava nodded. I want them to understand how wrong it was, and I don't want other people to go through this. Jackson's gaze softened. I'll make sure that message is loud and clear. He paused, letting out a weary sigh. The media will be relentless for a while. You can lay low or you can speak out if you feel it could help others. The choice is yours. I'll support you either way. Ava swallowed. I'll think about it. For now, I'd just like to breathe. Jackson nodded. Then let's do that. I have a car waiting to take us to the hotel. In the days that followed, the story dominated headlines. Clips of the incident, captured by multiple passengers, were shared millions of times across social media. News pundits debated the broader issues of racial profiling and abuse of authority. Hashtags calling for accountability trended for nearly a week. At first, Ava was overwhelmed by the attention. She spent long hours in her hotel room, ignoring the constant ping of her phone. But with her father's encouragement and the support of thousands of strangers who were outraged by her treatment, Ava decided to go public. She recorded a short video statement that Jackson's PR team helped distribute. In it, she described what happened, expressed her gratitude to the passengers who stood up for her, and called for airlines across the industry to revisit their training protocols to prevent future incidents. The video went viral, prompting an outpouring of empathy. Skybridge Airlines, under Jackson Carter's directive, acted swiftly. Mr. Reynolds and Sandra were suspended pending an investigation. After reviewing the evidence, including passenger statements and the videos, both were terminated. The internal report cited gross misconduct, racial profiling, and excessive use of force. Additionally, they faced potential civil suits from Ava's legal team, aided by the lawyer from Seat 1A, who had provided his contact information after the flight. Karma struck hardest when it emerged that this wasn't Mr. Reynolds' first offense. Several former passengers stepped forward, sharing stories of his hostile behavior at different airports. Internal memos revealed he had been previously reprimanded. His final act of aggression toward the CEO's daughter sealed his fate. Sandra, who had fewer prior complaints, pleaded ignorance, claiming she was just following Reynolds' lead. However, the evidence showed she was complicit in the harassment, resulting in her dismissal as well. In the aftermath, the press swarmed. Jackson Carter gave a press conference, standing beside Ava. Cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, but Jackson remained composed. Skybridge Airlines was founded on the principle of bridging cultures and connecting people with respect and dignity. What happened to my daughter, Ava, is unacceptable, and it's something no passenger should ever experience. We will redouble our efforts to ensure that every employee, from gate agents to flight crews, upholds the highest standards of fairness and compassion. It was a hard lesson in how quickly prejudices can surface, even within an airline that prided itself on diversity. Yet, it was also a testament to the power of public outcry, solidarity among passengers, and the unwavering bond between a father and a daughter determined to stand up for what was right. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster of a story, filled with injustice, heartbreak, and ultimately, redemption. Ava's journey reminds us all that even in the face of discrimination and doubt, our voices matter. And when we stand up together, real change can happen. Whether it's one courageous bystander recording on a phone or a CEO determined to uphold his company's values, every action counts. If you found this story powerful or inspiring, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories to life, stories that challenge us to confront prejudice, champion fairness, and celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. So let's keep this conversation going. Comment below with your thoughts, share this video with friends, and be sure to subscribe for more compelling stories. Together, let's continue to shine a light on truth and justice.